All right. Good morning, Gallatin. Thank you so much for joining us today as we are in our 6th week of Do Good Gallatin. And today I am here with Amy Burke-Salyers of Ashley's Place Sumner Child Advocacy Center. And she is the executive director of Ashley's Place. Thank you so much for being with me today, Amy.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Can you give us kind of some background on Ashley's Place and kind of what y'all do, what y'all encompass?
Absolutely. We are the only child advocacy center serving Sumner County. We are unique in that we are a nonprofit, but we are also by state statute part of the investigative team assisting with severe child abuse investigations.
Oh, wow.
So we get primarily probably 95% of what we work with is child sexual abuse, but we do also get those referrals that are severe physical abuse, child deaths, and then sometimes we'll get some drug exposed, just depending on the age of the child and the type of drug that's involved. So we were established in 2000. And just a little bit of history on how we came about and how, as a community, we decided we needed a child advocacy center. There was a young lady by the name of Ashley, which hence where our name came from. And she had told her teacher that day about the abuse that was going on in her home, which is not uncommon. Kids often build those relationships with teachers. Teacher took her to the guidance counselor, and which, again, it's really not uncommon because that's the person who handles those types of things. Back then, the reporting laws were different, and schools or agencies could have one point reporting person, as opposed to now it's the person with the direct knowledge. But back then, that's typically the principal, so they had taken Ashley to the principal, said, tell the principal what you told me, because he or she's responsible for making that report. The principal called law enforcement. They sent a road officer to do his or her report, talk to Ashley, realized that this needed to be criminal investigations. So that went up to criminal investigations. The investigator got there. She talked to Ashley. She happened to realize that DCS should have been involved on the front end because there's a safety issue, and this is somebody in her home. And so then DCS got involved, and they came out and they talked to Ashley. And so within about maybe 3 hours, she's gone through this story 6 different times. Just in getting the ball rolling. No therapy services, no court prep. There were charges, so there was trial. And she got to trial, and she said, I'm just not telling this story again. I've told the story X amount of times. Just really was not prepared for what the courtroom looked like, what was, kind of what that was going to entail. Fortunately, it all worked out. But for us, that was really for our communities. There's got to be a better way to get kids through a system that is just not historically very child victim friendly.
Yeah.
So our Child Advocacy Center was born. So what we do as part of that investigative team, we have a full-time forensic interviewer. So she does all of the child interviews for our law enforcement and DCS as part of that investigation. So she's trained in a very specific kind of fact-finding, legally defensible, non-leading interview training model. We have a full-time family advocate who meets with our families, makes sure they are getting referred for services that they need, that they are filing for victims' compensation if they're eligible for that. Really kind of plays liaison between the DA's office and the family for those cases that we have charges. And we are at about 2 years right now for that process to get through the whole system. So it's a long time in anybody's life, but it's a long time in the life of a child, especially. We have our therapy component. So any child who has a disclosure of severe abuse is eligible for therapy. It is all grant-based, so there are no fees to families. We don't bill insurance. Actually, our United Way funding is a good portion of our specific to our therapy program here for Sumner County. And they can come in, so kids can start therapy at the onset. They may graduate from therapy, and then maybe court starts 6 months later, a year later, they can come back. So it's very cohesive as far as just making sure they're getting a continuum of services.
Right.
And the therapist is often part of that court prep piece as well, because we do spend a lot of time getting kids ready for court as much as we can, so that they know what to expect. They're getting more comfortable in the courtroom. We have a full-time facility dog. Her name is Ophira. I should probably could have brought her, but I wasn't sure if you'd get to see her on here. So she's a fully trained service dog, and she goes in the forensic interviews with kids, and then she goes on the witness stand with kids when they have to testify. So her job is to provide that emotional comfort, kind of calming element at the various different stages. We do a lot of case staffing with our law enforcement DA's office. We're meeting once a month, well, really twice a month, but staffing cases are broke up. Where we're going through what's been done, what's not been done. If it's not been done, when's it going to get done? Who's responsible for it? To really help from hold each other and ourselves accountable for those investigations, but also hopefully keep families, from falling through the cracks, or kids from falling through the cracks. And then there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes training that we provide, whether financially when we've got the money and bringing folks in, or sending them out to conferences, doing training. We do a lot of training with our law enforcement in services from a first responder standpoint. So we're not having those repetitive interviews with kids. And we do a lot of community prevention education. So pretty much any place that will have us, we will go and talk to both youth and adults around prevention, recognizing, reporting, minimizing opportunities, primarily around that child sexual abuse, and just kind of how we can prevent that from happening.
I'm a little speechless. I'm so glad that Ashley's Place exists, just hearing about what you offer. I was telling you before that I teach dance, and so I have students, and I have a very close relationship with a lot of them, just because that's what teachers do, and I've made it very clear that if they ever need anything, they can reach out to me. And of course, if something dangerous is happening to them, I would contact the appropriate authority or their parents, depending on what the situation was. But I just love that this exists, because it's something that I see a need for.
Absolutely, and it really gives kids a comfortable, or as comfortable as can be given the circumstances, but a child-friendly environment for those services to happen. Again, I kind of talked about that kind of continuation of care throughout that process. And really, when we look at, research and common sense both tells us that the more comfortable a child is, the more likely they are to disclose, or the more likely they are able to give us the amount of detail that we need to make decisions and keep them safe and complete that investigation. And really, even from an economic standpoint, there's some excellent research out there that looks at communities that operate from this team approach, where we're teaming on the front end, versus communities that don't. And it saves taxpayers 36%, because we're not double, we're not out going multiple.
Well,
absolutely.
I also, I spoke with Susan Phillips of the Cumberland Mental Health and Volunteer Behavioral Services a few weeks ago, and I am a huge proponent of therapy for everyone. And so the fact that you're able to offer therapy to these kids is just, claps. I don't even know how to express my happiness about the fact that it is something that they're able to have access to. I think it is so important, especially when working through trauma, to be able to do so in a way that is not going to just repress all your emotions and harm you in the long term. So I'm so glad, so glad that exists, especially since there's a dog involved.
Yeah, right. Dogs make everything better. I have learned since we've had her, I was like, people are just more excited to see the dogs than but we're okay with that.
That is, I think that animals in general make people so much more comfortable. I have 2 cats, and I consider them to be, they're not registered as anything, but I consider them to be my personal therapy cat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I use them all the time when I'm having a bad day to just kind of cuddle them. And so I love it. It feels as though y'all have looked at the situation and every possible thing that you can provide to help these kids not just survive the experience, but also thrive afterwards. And it sounds like you have just kind of tackled that head on and made it happen. And you said since 2000?
We've been established since 2000.
Wow.
We are fully accredited with the National Children's Alliance out of DC. So we were accredited in 2010, our original accreditation. We did reaccreditation in 2015, and we are actually up for our second reaccreditation this October. So it's every 5 years. And so they have a very detailed list of standards of the types of services we're providing, what services we're providing, that they are free to families, and we're not charging for those. So there's 46 centers across the state, and we all operate independently. Most of those are accredited, so we're all providing the same level of services. It just may look a little bit different. What Davidson County needs is going to look a little bit different than what Sumner needs, or what makes it good.
And so you mentioned that you get funding from United Way. Where did your funding typically come? You said grants, and of course United Way.
We have a couple of contracts with Department of Children's Services, so we have some funding from them. We've got some VOCA federal money that actually helps fund our family victim advocate position. And then, so those are our only contracts, and then the rest are all grants. Memorial Foundation is a large contributor, the Healing Trust, of course, United Way. Those are probably our three largest as far as grants. And then, of course, there's always some smaller, Emmy Lou Tompkins, Publix, the Predators Foundation, just some smaller different grants that contribute as well.
Do you do any local fund, like do people donate money?
We do have a base of private donations that come in, and then we get some funding kind of through the court system too, as our DAs are very helpful in different cases they have. That may be part of somebody's restitution to make a donation here. But we most definitely do have folks that donate privately to that, as far as just when you kind of look at that line item, it's kind of non-discretionary funds, which is really the most helpful. For us, that non-discretionary, just because that's usually, when you look at United Way or Healing Trust, and those are specific to therapy, and that's great. Those two together cover probably 90% of our therapy budget. But a lot of times kind of finding those general operating funds sometimes can be kind of difficult. So our private donations come in, are helpful from that standpoint.
They're helpful providing you with like staples and office paper.
Yeah, keeping the lights on and things that aren't necessarily what we think about. I guess the touchy-feely aspects of it.
Right.
But we have to have those things in order to be able to provide the direct services. The therapy and the interviews and the advocacy for for our kiddos.
I think in terms of I worked in nonprofits for a while in Knoxville, and that always anything that I was able to put towards the less fun stuff was so important, but people don't want to donate for that.
Right. It is hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
We do have a good base of private donors that are consistent donors that just, they just tell us wherever it needs to go, you put it where it needs to go. So
that's fantastic. That's great. So in terms of, what I've been kind of focusing on with Do Good Gallatin is how things have changed because of COVID-19. And I also know that the court systems have been shut down in a lot of cases. And then, of course, students are not in school anymore. And so that's probably a valuable touch point that you are no longer able to, or I don't want to say take advantage of, because we don't want any of this to be necessary, but how have things changed because of the shutdowns?
Well, I think it's you can kind of look at it from a couple of different aspects. I know there's been a lot of talk about things like domestic violence increasing, and they talk about child abuse increasing. And I think, unfortunately, that is probably going to be the case. However, as you mentioned, kids are not in school. They're not going to youth groups. They're not involved in activities where typically, those are the folks that kids may reach out to tell, that then are the ones that are reporting. So I think we have seen a little bit of a lull And again, I unfortunately, I don't think that it's because it's not happening. I think we're going to see that increase probably a little further down the road, once kids get back, and they have contact with teachers and they have contacts with, just other people in their life.
Right.
So I think maybe come fall, winter, I would not be surprised if we then see that increase just because it's coming to our attention. As opposed to now, kids are just unfortunately are isolated.
They're stuck.
They're isolated. There's stressors involved that families, didn't have to deal with prior to this, or it might be, maybe caregivers are having to use other child care avenues that they typically wouldn't use. That maybe it's not because they're knowingly putting in their child, in a bad situation.
They just have to have child care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I just think there's going to be a lot of factors that are going to affect that. I just think we're going to see it a little delayed, not necessarily right now. Of course, for us, as far as the services that we provide, we're considered essential employees, so we, continued to work. We did kind of go to an emergency interview basis only initially for probably the first 3 weeks, and then we started back with just doing scheduling interviews, non-emergencies, like 2 days a week. So my staff would only be in the office those 2 days. And then currently we're back to, we've opened our schedule up for Monday through Friday, but if there's nothing scheduled, then I have them working from home, just to kind of limit that contact.
Exposure,
yeah. Absolutely. And of course, all of the things in place that we're doing, to make sure our families are safe, my staff are safe, as far as, screening questions and sanitizing and, all asking families as soon as they hit the door to, wash their hands. And unfortunately, because of the nature of the work that we do, the wearing of masks is not real conducive when you're doing therapy or those interviews. But we're doing everything else that we can to make sure, everybody stays healthy.
Yes. And I'll say, I taught a dance class in a mask earlier this week, and it is very interesting, trying to figure that out. So for me, and I think for a lot of people, we're just going to be doing the best that we possibly can. I'm immunocompromised. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and so I'm taking every possible precaution, including masks. But I did have a dance class that instead of, we're doing a virtual recital, recording our video. And so we have been doing virtual lessons, but we're meeting once to record in a very, very large space. But I had them come over and dance in my backyard because it's wide open space. Right. We were able to stay very far away from each other. There's, air and all of that. And everyone's doing the best we can right now, and I'm thankful for that. I want to say to our viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the comments. This is the goal of this, is to teach you about our nonprofit, so that if you are interested in donating any money, you know which ones you care to donate to. And I think that Ashley's Place and this organization is a wonderful, wonderful organization that I knew very little about until a few moments ago, and I'm so glad to be learning.
I think, unfortunately for us, we're often one of those agencies that folks don't know we exist until they need our services, and
right.
which makes it kind of difficult, but understandable.
Yes, I absolutely, and I think maybe doing these Do Good Gallatin has helped people know. I know we've learned about like legal aid, which I had no idea what they did, and I am such a big fan now of everything that Legal Aid and Zach Oswald over there. They are just wonderful.
They do a great job.
They really do, and Cumberland Mental Health, Susan Phillips, they're fantastic. Sorry, my cat just slid into the room. Like, who was it that slid Patrick Swayze in socks, or was it? I'm not sure. I'm thinking about old movies here, but he is going crazy right now, my little cat. Yeah. So, in terms of what Ashley's Place can do for the community, we've heard a lot about that. What would be the best way for the community to support y'all right now?
Well, of course, it's always financial. That's always a need.
Yes.
And especially, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how things kind of play out in the next 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Even when we look at, we've had some grants that have changed some guidelines that we've, lost, or maybe they've gone from, can only apply every other year or every 2 years. So we're kind of just compensating for that.
Absolutely.
With the employment situation, even if we've got folks that did payroll deduction, but then if they're not there working, to have that may affect us as far as looking at any of those places that we receive payroll deduction from. So we're just not really sure how that's going to play out. But so financial is always important. Absolutely. And then there's we have a small volunteer base that we utilize for therapy. If anybody's interested in that, we do have a couple spots open for that. Of course, we are run by a board of directors, and those are volunteer spots. Snacks, individually wrapped snacks, bottled water. We go through a lot of those as kids are coming in, especially with our therapy nights, because
Right.
they might be coming from school, or they may be, they had their, yeah. And even, not even just our kids, but our law enforcement and our DCS, if they're working a case and they're here on an interview, that pack of Cheez-Its and bottled water might be their lunch.
It might be their only meal until 10 o'clock. Yeah. I understand that. In terms of the volunteers you mentioned, are you looking for therapists to volunteer?
Well, our therapy is run 3 nights a week, and so we're here till 4:30, and so I've got a core base of volunteers, so it's the same folks that our families are seeing each week as they come in, that kind of help with therapy coverage and just come in at 4:30 when we leave to just be another person in the body, greet the next family that comes in, make sure they've got snacks, and we are down. Of course, right now things are a little crazy, and we're just starting to get back with therapy, but we are down 2 volunteers for that core group. If that is something that somebody would be interested in, that kind of goes through. First, I'm going to run through all the background checks and all of that stuff, because they're going to be here, with families and with kids. Sometimes we will do, about twice a year, it might be like a group project to do like yard cleanup and kind of get the outside cleaned up. That's not a regularly, volunteer position, but kind of some things that we've utilized in the past. And of course, as I mentioned, the board is, they meet once a month, and those are volunteer positions as well.
Well, that is, I'm just, I love that Ashley's Place exists. I keep saying that, but I didn't know. And I wonder how many other people maybe didn't know. And, it's just a wonderful thing that exists. And I am hopeful that maybe our viewers, some of them might decide that they want to volunteer or donate or, anything.
And they can go to our website, of course, or they're always
website?
welcome to call here. I'm sorry.
What is the website?
It is ashleysplace.net.
I'm going to go ahead and put that in the comments. And if people want to make donations, can they? How would you suggest they go about it?
There is a donation that they could do that through the website if they wanted to. That just links to our PayPal. Or we've got folks that if they've got payroll deduction opportunities at work, or that just mail in a check or drop a check off, or cash, or whatever's easiest for them, really.
What would be, do you, off the top of your head, do you know the mailing address for mailing a check?
It's 315 West Smith Street.
And that is Gallatin?
Gallatin, yes.
All right. I'm going to just put that in there in the comments. That's one of the goals, is to encourage people to donate to these nonprofits. So one of the things that keeps coming to mind for me is, if you're watching and you have children that you communicate with on the regular, be watching to, make sure that they are okay, and take note if anything is different. That's been something that I've tried to be very cognizant of as I've been watching my dance students. And luckily, I know all of their parents very well, and these girls are just, I'm very lucky in the kids that I work with, and that they're all A-okay, but I'm sure that there are people out there who are maybe not recognizing the signs of problems. And
Well, and a lot of times, because unfortunately, a lot of the signs and symptoms can have other reasons that they might be occurring, or maybe by themselves they don't really stand out. But then, kind of once something comes out, it's not uncommon for us to have parents be like, "Oh, now like
no,
this,
I
this, this,
understand.
and this makes sense."
Yes.
We are always, if there is any group or group of parents or anybody that is interested in, I say in service, but I mean even just community education around signs and symptoms and reporting and minimizing opportunities amongst our kids, I would be happy to come and do a training or just kind of an information session about that.
Yeah.
It does not have to be a daycare or a school or a church. I mean, we've had groups of parents that have gotten together and have had us come and speak. So I'm definitely open to. And I don't care if it's one person or if it's 100 people. Anytime I get that information out, that's a great thing.
I think that is fantastic, and I'll keep that in mind as I hear of different opportunities, because we're like, children are the future of our world, and it is so important to protect them at all costs.
And I think we just unfortunately don't, nobody wants to think about that happening within their own family. But, when you look at the statistics, and 1 in 10 children will be a victim of child sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. And 90% of offenders are either known to or related to that child and family. So I think it's easier for us as parents and even as adults to think of stranger danger. That's great information, but that's typically not who is offending on our children.
Right.
And that's hard to think of that being someone in my family or someone in my church, my church group, or, wherever, and because we just don't want to think about that being somebody that we're invested in and care about and trust.
Right. But it is, stranger danger is a thing, of course, but a lot of abuse happens because the adult is able to be intimate with the child in whatever way.
Right.
And that
it's
is
not really having those opportunities. And,
right.
If they've got those
don't have those opportunities unless they're kidnapping a child, but you have adults who it's hard to think about. It's very distressing to think about, but it is something that people need to be aware of.
I would gladly find another job if it didn't exist.
Right. Well, I hate to say that I hope that one day you don't need that job. The world doesn't need your job to exist, but 1 in 10, that's huge.
Yeah, that is a lot of kids when you think about, how many kids do you have in your dance class?
That's what I'm thinking about. Like,
if you've got a classroom of 30 kids, that's 3 kids out of one classroom. And then you think of the classrooms we have across the county.
I mean, the dance studio has 250 students. That's 25 of our students that would, and that's mind-boggling and heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, yeah. It's hard to think about.
That's where I should have brought Ophi with me so that I could see. But then, see, there's a cute dog.
but then we do think about, like, oh, and by the way, probably if you are donating to stuff that is not designated to other things, you might be feeding the dog.
Feeding the dog.
Could be part of it.
Or, she's a yellow lab, so she's an eater.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's the best kind of, labs are just they're so good.
She probably is been the best addition that we've had. We've had her for maybe 4 years, I think now.
That's awesome.
She's had several hundred interviews. She has had several jury trials that she's participated in, and court proceedings. And so we've been very fortunate because the courts, all of our judges are very open to having her. She's mainly in Judge Gay's court, in criminal court, but he loves her to death. So they're very open to it right from the beginning. So that was very helpful.
Well, I am so glad to hear that. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you think our viewers should know? I know I said this would be 20 minutes and now we're going on 30, so sorry, there's just so much information. But is there anything else our viewers should know?
No, I mean, not that I can think of. Like I said, if there's anybody that's got an interest in it or just wants to talk more about the center or what we do or how they can help, to please reach out to me. I'll be happy to get with them and, can share what we do need a little bit more and get them a volunteer application if that's something they're interested in.
Awesome. Okay, so please do reach out to Amy. I'm sure that there's a contact form on the website. There's also their Facebook page, so go follow along there. And if you do have some spare stimulus check money or, any sort of extra money that you would be willing to donate, they are gladly accepting those donations. So thank you all so much for watching today, and I hope that you learned something, and thank you again, Amy. This has been very informative.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Bye, Gallatin.